Hello, Professor. My name is Alexander Wong, and I'll be introducing to you our student course registration and mark entry application, in short, SCRAME. My other group members are Caroline and Jinwei, and we are group 2. So now I will start off by going through option number 1, which is adding a student. Okay, so first we need to enter in a student ID. Now you see, if we enter in a student ID that already exists, we cannot do that. We cannot add a student that already exists. So we need to enter in one that hasn't existed yet. Okay, so since we entered one that hasn't existed, we can now enter the new student's name. Okay, and as you can see, we have created a new student with student ID 40 and name Sarah Lin. Okay, so now I will go through option number 2, which is adding a course. Okay, so now choose 2. Okay, so now we need to enter in a course code. Now we see, if we enter in a course code that has already existed, it will prompt us to enter in a course code that doesn't exist instead. So now we enter in a course code that doesn't exist. Okay, so now we need to enter in a course name, say introduction to something. Okay, so now we need to enter in a professor's name. Okay, so now if we enter a professor's name that is not in the system, then we'll end up, it will not allow us to enter in that name, and it will re-prompt us to enter in a professor's name that's actually in the system. So having entered a proper professor's name, a valid professor's name, we now move on to the course type. Number 1, which is lectures only. Number 2, which is lectures and tutorials only. Or number 3, which is lectures, tutorials, and labs. So now let's pick maybe number 2. Okay, so now we need to choose the number of tutorial classes for the course. So let's pick 2. Okay, so now we just need to pick some tutorial class code, any tutorial class code. Okay, so as you can see, since the class code already exists, we need to enter in a class code that doesn't exist instead. Okay, so now after we enter in a class code that doesn't exist, now we need to decide the class size for that. According to assignment, we should fix it at 10. Okay, so now we need to enter in the next class code and the next class size. Okay, so now that we created both tutorial classes already, now we need to enter in the lecture group code. Okay, as you can see, we have created a lecture group code and we have created a new course. Okay, so now we'll be going through option number 3, which is registering a student into a course. Okay, so now we're entering a student ID. As you can see, if we enter a student ID that doesn't exist, we need to instead enter a student ID that actually does exist. So now next we need to enter a course to register. So maybe say 201. Now see, it doesn't exist. So now we need to enter a course that actually does exist as well. So maybe 2005. Okay, so now as you can see, a table comes out and we need to choose which class code we want. Say if we enter a class code that's not in the table, it will prompt us again to instead enter in one that is in the table. So once we enter in one that's in the table, then we actually register that student to that class. Okay, so now I'll go through option number 4, checking the slots for a course. Okay, so now as usual, we need to enter a course ID. If we enter a wrong one, it doesn't allow us to, so we need to enter a correct one. Okay, so now that we have entered a correct one, a table pops out that gives us all the information that we want. It tells us all the vacancies that we want, and it will list what vacancies there are for different class types, like in this case, tutorial and lecture. Okay, so now I'll be going through option number 5. So what we'll be doing is printing the student list by class type for our course. Okay, so now as usual, we're entering a course ID. And if we enter the wrong one, it will not allow us to do that. So now we enter a correct course ID. and out pops a table with all the class types, and for each class type, it will list out all the students with their student IDs and their student names. Okay, so now I'll go through option number 6, which is adding an assessment for a course. Okay, so as usual, we enter a course ID. If it's incorrect, it doesn't allow us. Then we enter in the correct one. Okay, so now we need to choose the name of the assessment. Maybe say examination. Now, as you can see, because there was already an examination entered in for 2009 before, it doesn't allow us to enter in another examination. So let's enter in something else, maybe a project. Okay, so now we have to choose whether it's a coursework component or not. Obviously, this is a project, it is a coursework component. Okay, so now we need to choose the weightage. And now we've successfully added our assessment. Okay, so now I'll be going through option number 7, entering a student's marks. Okay, so now we have to enter a student ID. If we enter a student ID that's not in the course, then it will not allow us to do so. So we need to enter a valid student ID. Okay, so now we need to enter a course ID. Then we need to enter an assessment name. Okay, so then lastly we enter a score. Okay, as you can see, we have entered in the student's marks. Okay, so now we'll be demonstrating option number 9, which is printing a student's transcript. Okay, so first we need to enter a student ID. If you enter in the wrong student ID, it will not allow you to do so. So now you need to enter a correct student ID. Okay, so now once you enter a correct student's ID, it will print the transcript. And as you can see, in a nice table format, it will print both the overall score and split it up into coursework and non-coursework. And it will show you the weightage as well.